Hello. Hi, the very good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this event called Nature on the Balance Sheet. So my name is Naoko Ishii. I'm the director and professor at Center for Global Commons at University of Tokyo. Can you hear me, by the way? I just want to check. Good. Okay. Yeah, and today we want to talk about and explain about this and Nature on the Balance Sheet initiative to you, and try to really get comments that from you to how to strengthen that initiative. So the reason and about that this Nature on the Balance Sheet, what's behind it is when we see this global environmental situation, we all know that nature has been really lost at incredible, outrageous speed and scale. And we really need to find a way to how to arrest it and how to shift the complete valuation and economic system so that we can appreciate the real value of natural capital. That was behind of this initiative of Nature on the Balance Sheet. And I will explain to you a little bit more about what we really want to do. I just want to acknowledge that Mark Go, that the CEO of the Capitalist Coalition, is part of this Nature on the Balance Sheet initiative, and Guido from Systemic, again, the partner of this Nature on the Balance Sheet. Do we have anybody from Land Banking Group? Not, but these are 4 institutions that are initiating this initiative, Nature on the Balance Sheet. And we have been working for this for about more than close to 2 years. And actually at the last year's COP at Baku, the COP29, we already did a soft launch. And I remember Carlos was there to explain why it's needed from a science point of view. Then that and also that the Nakamura-san, that who was a president of Ajinomoto Brazil around that time. He's now president of the entire Ajinomoto world, but he was there. So we have some those supporters who are witness the people that are allies and why we need this kind of initiative and how we want to go forward. So that's the purpose of this session. But before I explain that why Nature on the Balance Sheet initiative, I also want to put it a bit of this COP30 Brazilian context. I think that we hear from Carlos in a moment that what's happening in Amazon, we are so close to the tipping points. He will explain to you, but also that just another pavilion, science pavilion, planetary science pavilion, which Carlos co-chair with Johan Rockström, that this is the first COP, that the COP has this science pavilion at the center of that conversation, the negotiation. So it's such an incredible movement on this COP, so that the people wake up that why science is so important. And before it gets too long, we need to find a way to initiate actions. So that the Johan Rockström will explain to you, if you go to Science Pavilion, Planetary Science Pavilion, we have already exceeded 7 out of 9 planetary boundaries, so that we are actually that approaching this tipping points much faster with such a speed, and we really need to understand how to arrest it. This initiative of this Nature on the Balance Sheet is one way to really catalyze this system change. The nature so far has been only addressed as a risk point of view, because we degraded nature so fast and so big, but how we can really appreciate the full value of nature, how to account for the true value of the nature, so that the nature becomes an investable asset, economic capital, an investable asset. So not only to address that the nature from risk point of view, how we could really get more finance that the decision of the economy to the nature. So that was behind it. So let me just explain just a few slides what we are trying to do through this Nature on the Balance Sheet. So I mentioned that even last year's Baku COP, we launched this idea to put the nature on the balance sheet. Since then, there is one critical, tangible progress we made in Bellagio that in a retreat, we put 20 experts in one room for 3 days and try to chart the pathway, how we can really get the nature on the balance sheet. So this is the outcome document. So that you know that in this world, there are a lot of progress like TNFD, ISSB, and UNCR, but how these two, a lot of progress really to bring together to chart the pathway for the nature on the balance sheet. So our assessment of where we are is that we can think about natural capital accounting stage. It's a measurement to discover the value, then quantify the value through TNFD and CR and ISO 14054. But then it's not good enough for the economy, decision makers or investors to take the nature on the balance sheet or to take the nature as an economic decision making. We need to find a way to step from discover, quantify to recognize, how to recognize the value of the natural capital through market transaction, either the trade or contract. We need to find that pathway, and that is the toughest part. Without that, nature on the balance sheet and natural capital accounting just to stay at the academic exercise, but to stay at the statistics department of the government. So that is not really good enough. How we can really move forward to make the natural capital as an investable asset. So here is another progress we made during the Bellagio retreat. So this first 1 to 3 box in blue, natural capital assessment, accounting, is the same one, but the challenge is how to make it as on the balance sheet, financial statement, to bring this to go from 1 to 3. We need to mobilize 2 other important enablers. So the one is, of course, that the participants at the capital market, that the investors, decision makers, but then another very important enablers is actually the policy, that the regulators, those people who will make that investment in natural capital is kind of rewarded. So we need to mobilize not only market participants, but also to change this incentive structure or to penalize that the bad deed. So these are 5 steps to put the nature as an investable asset. So that is that the roadmap. And then since that we create this roadmap, there is another very important that progress in my mind. We were able to mobilize a few Japanese participants to this initiative, and the 2 of them are together with us. That the Nakamura-san of the Ajinomoto and Isono-san, that the CEO of that the OG. These are 2 big supporters who do understand why this kind of initiative is important. What does it really mean to their business, but how we can also strengthen this kind of initiative. So today, what we want to do together with you for next 1 hour is to ask that the Carlos for scientific background, why this kind of initiative is important from even Amazon point of view, science point of view, but an Amazon point of view, how we can arrest this and going, falling from the tipping points. So it's a science-based assessment. Then that I want to ask the 2 business leaders, that the OG and the Ajinomoto, who are already part of this ship, that how we can chart the pathway to the goal. Then I will hear from the owner, that working from the CSO, civil society organization, who can bring us that what kind of things it's also important to take to this initiative from CSO, the local community point of view, because sometimes we miss those important voices. Then lastly, from Guido of the systemic, that who can explain mostly that this step 4 and 5, why those enablers are important for us to move up to put the nature on the balance. That is a plan for the day. So let's get it on. That first, we would like to ask Carlos, that from a scientific point of view, what is first? Let's please tell us where we are on this Amazon. You sometimes talk that we are so close to the tipping points. What's the impact if we go fall from that cliff. So that's not only Amazon, it's a global environmental challenge. So Carlos, you can speak to us maybe 5, 6, even 7 minutes about where we are from a science point of view. As you know, that Carlos is a legend of the scientist and devoted his life that in Amazon. So we are so lucky to have him to speak to us. Carlos, please.
Thank you very much, Naoko, for inviting me again. I was in Baku.
Okay. So.
I was in Baku in the first meeting. Yes, nature for the balance sheets absolutely essential all over the planet, but I will focus in the Amazon. Let me just initially tell you how close the Amazon is of a tipping point. We have about 23 tipping points in the world. The closest one we are at is the coral reefs. The coral reefs bleaching. We are really very close. If the temperature, tropical ocean temperature exceeds 1.5 degrees, we are going to extinct up to 2 degrees, more than 99% of coral reefs. And as you know, coral reefs maintain 18 to 25% of the ocean biodiversity. So, but I think, in my opinion, one of the second tipping points is the Amazon. Before, with many studies, people would say, no, the Amazon will only cross the tipping point when the global warming reached 3.5 degrees warming. So it seemed it would be in next century. However, we did studies showing the Amazon tipping point is very close, not only due to global warming, primarily due to deforestation. Now, many studies show 75% of the tipping point risks coming from deforestation, degradation, and 25% from global warming. What's going on in the Amazon? Why the Amazon is so close to the tipping point? And, let's look what happened in the last 40, 50 years. All southern Amazon, from here all the way to Bolivia, Amazon. 2.5 million square kilometers, all the southern Amazon. In 45 years, the dry season, which was 3 to 4 months, now is 4 to 5 months. 5 weeks increase in the length of the dry season in 45 years. The dry season also is 30% drier and 2 degrees warmer. A tremendous increase in tree mortality in all this area. And a recent study with my colleague Luciana Gatti, we show the southeastern Amazon, southern state here, Pará state, northern next state, Mato Grosso, all the forest there has become a carbon source. As we know, global biomes remove 1/3 of all carbon dioxide that we emit. The Amazon in the 1990s was removing 1.5 up to 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide. It's still removing the whole Amazon, but this area has become a carbon source. So I'm just saying the Amazon is very close to a tipping point. We did studies showing that if we exceed 20-25% deforestation, we are now 17-18%. And global warming reaches 2 degrees warming, no way we are going to really reach the tipping point. That might happen by 2050 if we continue with deforestation and global warming. And as soon as it reaches the tipping point, then the self-degradation, many studies indicate a self-degradation will degrade 70% of the Amazon. The Amazon will remain only along the Atlantic coast and along the Andes. The Andes rainfall is 3 to 5 meters. It will be enough rain to maintain. But 70% will be completely degraded, turning into an open canopy, highly degraded ecosystem. If that happens, more than 250 billion tons of carbon dioxide will be emitted, making it impossible to maintain the temperature below 1.5 degrees. We are going to lose the largest biodiversity in the world. The degradation of tropical forests, all over tropical forests, brings a tremendous risk of epidemics and pandemics. Last year, for the first time in 500 years, we had 2 epidemics here in the Amazon, Maiaro fever, Oropush fever. Oropush fever transmits all over Brazil because it's transmitted by insect that exists all over Brazil, more than 25,000 cases last year. I'm just saying tremendous risk. And also, the Amazon forest recycles water so well. This is ecological evolution, tens of millions of years. 40% of rainfall in the Amazon depends on water recycling, 20% here, 50% close to the Andes. And the Amazon exports a tremendous amount of water vapor. We did studies in the long time ago, 35, almost 40 years ago, with colleagues from the UK, and we calculated that 45% of the water vapor that comes from the Atlantic Ocean through the trade winds exit the south of the Amazon, and about 40%, 50% of rainfall south of the Amazon, the tropical savanna, in Portuguese, Cerrado biome, depends on that. The Atlantic rainforest also. So I'm saying if that happens, we are going really to have a terrible thing. And I finalize by saying one more thing. When you enter this beautiful pavilion, we measure humidity there. Normal humidity, you see, of course, tropical forest always very humid and also a little bit drier. But let me tell you a terrible thing. The risk is global for the planet. But if we cross the tipping point by 2050, then 2070, we may have degraded most of the Amazon. So the temperature will increase a lot. So let's say we do not control much the global warming. So the global warming by 2070 may be close to 2 degrees or more than 2 degrees. And without the forest, the temperature will increase 4 or 5 degrees. So in that case, and we are close to the ocean, so it's very humid atmosphere. In that case, all of us would not be here. Belém becomes inhabitable. Our body, if the temperature, air temperature is above 35 degrees, our temperature, and the air is 100% relative humidity, we cannot transpire. Young people, elderly people our age, we live only half an hour, 1 hour. Most of you people, healthy people, 2 to 3 hours. I'm just saying, you know, nature really for a balance sheet, we have to avoid the tipping point of the Amazon. We have to look for nature-based solutions, zero deforestation, fire degradation, valuing all the indigenous knowledge, local communities, and creating a big restoration project, 1 million square kilometers, and what we call a social bioeconomy of healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. So we have to move in that direction. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, Carlos. It's scary enough, but also it's inspiring enough that why we need this kind of initiative. And whenever we mention nature on the balance sheet, first reaction from conservation communities, nature is priceless. You can't really put the nature on the balance sheet, but it's such an important message. Unless we find a way to transform our economic system, we continue to degrade the nature, which is the foundation, the very foundation of our life support system. So we have to find a way how to shift the current valuation system so that we can really take care of nature in this setting. So, and also I may want to say that the Brazil COP raised a very important point. It's a bioeconomy, ecological transformation. So this topic is really at the heart of this COP. Thank you, Carlos. Such an inspiring statement. I want to now move to the two business leaders, as I mentioned, who have been really a part of this Nature on the Balance Sheet initiative from the beginning. Because we talk a lot about Amazon, maybe first I want to talk to the Nakamura-san. As I mentioned, he was actually the part of this the launch last year, and he was actually the CEO of Brazil Ajinomoto, so that he has the heart of the Ajinomoto, but also he knows the Brazil business so well. So Nakamura-san, please go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. And it's a great honor to be here again. Our company, Ajinomoto, was founded in 1909 in Japan by the discovery of umami taste from natural amino acid. Now our company and biotech and food company, we are also the global leader in amino acids. Amino acids are the essential building block of all life, from microbes to plants and animals, and have the potential to offer the solution across ecosystems. Then we apply the amino acid-based technology through the food supply chain, from the upstream agriculture, livestock to downstream food processing. And here in Brazil, I was the president of the Ajinomoto Brazil for 3 years. Now we have 3,000 employees and founded in 1956. We have established a very eco-friendly production system for amino acid, producing amino acid by fermentation process from mainly sugarcane. And after getting amino acids, the remaining fermentation liquid is returned to the sugarcane field or other crop field as a fertilizer. So we call this circular system biocycle. And our fertilizer is rich of the amino acid. It's called a biostimulant to increase the crop yield, crop quality, and reducing the chemical fertilizer usage and water consumption with keeping the healthy soil condition. So since last year, we started the project of the recovery of degraded pasture verification study under our Japan-Brazil Green Partner Initiative, so that we have the science-based solution. And also we have the amino acid supplement for livestock farming. That one we call the AgiPro-L, the lysine essential amino acid supplement for the cattle feeding. It will increase the productivity and increase the farmer's income while reducing the greenhouse gas emission from cattle farming. For example, the 1 ton CO2 equivalent per 1 cow per 1 year, we can reduce. So depending on the number of the cattle, Brazil is the largest number of the cattle in the world. So we are expecting a lot. Our science-based solution can generate both the economic value and the climate benefits. Traditionally, the market value of our solution has been seen in terms of the improved productivity and cost reduction. But growing the urgency of climate change, I believe the paradigm shift is needed for how market value is defined. So some of the value is beginning to be recognized as the carbon credit, but it's not still fully appreciated by the market. There are several reasons. First one is that there is no standardized method to visualize the capital asset and the value created by the ecosystem services, such as the carbon sequestration, and Carlson mentioned the water purification, preventing the deforestation, and the land productivity gain, and so on. There is no standardized method to visualize. And secondly, that there is a lack of the framework to translate that value into financial terms, asset or the liabilities. It's quite important. So by joining NoBS, Ajinomoto, we hope work together to develop that method for evaluating the capital asset and value created by the ecosystem services. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's another big supporting voice for why NoBS is actually nature on the balance sheet initiative. Why nature on the balance sheet initiative is important to continue to support this kind of an effort that how to increase the value of natural capital and how to make it recognized through the market participants. So, and you raised such an important point that we need to see that that how to value this and the entire ecosystem services or integrity of natural capital, but also how we want to have a framework to translate those services into the financial assets. So thank you so much for this beautiful statement. Now I want to move to another business leader who has been with us from the beginning, that Isono-san. Isono-san is the CEO of the OG. He is the first one to raise the hand. Yes, he can join, OG can join this nature on the balance sheet Japanese consortium. That and then his story about the why he wants to do it is also very interesting. So if you can explain to us that why that the OG is wanted to be a part of that and how this initiative can help you move to do more. So Isono-san, please.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Isono from OG, and we'll start from what OG is, but OG is now only the party that doing this kind of a natural capital accounting. So that I just want to touch to the Global Forest Coalition, which is the International Sustainable Forest Coalition, ISFC, later. And we'll start from the OG, and the OG is a company which has started 152 years ago, and they started from making a paper in the city of Oji in the northern part of Tokyo. And at the beginning, it was started by the person named Shibusawa Eiichi, which is quite famous right now. And he has, what he was doing was collecting the used clothes, waste clothes from the city of Tokyo, which was named Edo at that time, but the clothes was made into paper at that time. But the paper demand has increased in the early modernized Japanese years, and so that the Shibusawa-san has started to think that the raw material should be the wood trees or the wood chips, so that they could produce more paper, because collecting clothes is quite a difficult job. I think it was at that time. So that, but from the beginning, what I want to say is that we were recycling the raw materials, because the used clothes was the waste clothes. So that we were a company that is recycling a lot of raw materials. And after beginning to use the raw material, for the forest resources for the raw material, the person who was the CEO at that time said that if you want to use the trees, you have the responsibility to plant the trees also, which means we were cultivating and using the trees, but we were also planting the trees. And it was the person who said that was about 100 years ago. So that our DNA, OG's DNA, is using the trees, cutting the trees, but we were also planting the trees from, say, 100 years ago. So that I believe that we are a company which is keeping the nature, in other words, in nature positive company for about a century or so. And but doing this kind of things, and right now we have globally 640,000 hectares of the plantation land. Roughly 250,000 hectares is in Brazil. And out of that, about 1/3 is the conservation forest, which is we are keeping the nature also. But the biggest issue is, as there as Nakamura-san said, that there's no standardization method of how to value the nature, or so that even though we are keeping the nature, it is not valued, it is not rewarded. So that's the biggest, and also we are paying the money to keep the nature. And there's a lot of rare species, birds and others living in the forest, but nobody's paying attention to that. And the only value coming from the forest is only the tree itself. So that I am very much interested in what Naoko-san is trying to do and put the nature on the balance sheet so that, but before that, we have to, as a forest owner, we have to measure what is in the forest. What's the value of the forest? Like a freshwater cultivation, the landslide, the soil is keeping the landslide, and other biodiversity. There's a lot of animals living there, and the carbon dioxide fixture is one of the things, and also the recreational area for the people is also a very important point. So that we also, as a company, OG, is measuring what's happening in the forest, but also I am involved in the International Sustainable Forest Coalition, which is right now, I think, more than 20, right now 23 companies are involved globally. And some of the companies within that ISFC, right now 18 organizations are working together, roughly 24 million hectares of the forest, and it covers about 21 countries, and trying to find out, using the same method, and trying to find out what the forest value is from there. And after measuring the forest value, I think it comes to the Naoko-san's idea of have to put it on the balance sheet, so that will be coming later after measuring the forest itself. And that's what we are doing right now, not only by OG, but with the Global Forest Owners Association Coalition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for another very inspiring story. I want to recognize Ross Hampton, the secretary of the ISFC, and then also Isono-san, part of ISFC is under a statement. You are now the chair of the ISFC, so we are very, very
well, just turned to the chairman of the ISFC
chairman of the,
3 days ago, maybe. Yeah. Thank you very much.
But the important of this ISFC is that they are really trying to do from the step 1, 2. They are doing that, but how they can really move on to step 3. And then I see that Mark, the Natural Capitalist Coalition, is partner with ISFC and TNFD to really to come up with this and standardize the methodology, how we can really climb up to this staircase. So it's really good for us to have this cloud with us. So, and maybe the second round, you could also explain your Salfoods initiative, why it's not monetized, and what kind of steps going forward is needed. So it's a second round question. Now I want to go to Ilona, and she is very well known globally, but then for forest and the community and the initiative, and then representing a lot of the local voices or indigenous voices. But I came to know her more through the World Economic Forum, that the Global Future Council of the Natural Capital. So we know each other. I know she knows this kind of thing, but you could actually be, what kind of things you think that we could do from your point of view. So Ilona, please. You can introduce yourself a little bit, what your institution is doing.
Thank you so much, Naoko and the Japan Pavilion, for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. So I'm Ilona Zabo, the co-founder of a think and do tank based in Brazil, but with global reach, called the Igarapé Institute. Igarapé are the small rivers that connect the big ones here. It's the way of the canoe in the Amazon. So I invite all of you to visit the Igarapés while you're here. We work on the security, nature, and climate and its intersections. So I would like to start by saying you are at the mega biodiversity country. Brazil holds around 20% of the world's biodiversity, 10% of the world's fresh water, 60% of the world's tropical forests. And we have to be able to just really exercise the potential of being this nature superpower for all the reasons that Professor Carlos already explained, but also because if we don't find a way to build new economic models that thrive with the abundance of nature, there's no place for us in this planet. The planet will recover, but there's no place for us. So to say, we really welcome the initiative you're leading with the partners here in Naoko, because if we don't value nature, and in our world, we can only value truly if we put an economic, let's say in economic terms, it's a way of, let's say, the transition that we have to overcome is how to not talk about price, but talk about value. And I think this is exactly what we should understand. The dependencies of our economy, 50% of our global GDP depends on ecosystem service, and of course, the dependence of our lives. So to say, I would like to pick from the point of view of someone working really much on the Amazon basin, but intersection with the, the Congo basin, Indonesia basin, and other places with the rich biodiversity and biomes. So what Professor Carlos mentioned, that let's say the danger today of deforestation, we started to ask, but what is driving this? What is happening, and what can we do? I'll focus on the data we have because the data we have is from Brazil, but I could say, given the work we do, that this is very similar in many other tropical forest countries. Over 90%, 90% of deforestation here is illegal. So it's based on illicit economies, which you call environmental crimes that converge with non-environmental crimes, that, let's say, is linked to supply chains that are global. And why I link this to this conversation? Because unless we find a way to value the forested land more than the cleared land, we're not going to win over the tipping point. So the invitation also, when we go into, like, say, the technical exercises, is to articulate, because, it's an economic problem. So the work we do at my think tank now in this nature pillar is trying to focus on the question, how do we transform these ecosystems of illicit economies into ecosystems of green enterprise that are compatible with the standing forest? And then you also came to the right place, Brazil, because we are already doing that. We are trying not only in the discussions, like to just push for a bioeconomy, for ecological and productive restoration with biodiversity, but also by creating already financial instruments and policy instruments that help us recognize this value. So this is a first COP that forest came as a big topic, and I would say makes a lot of sense. I would invite you to support the idea of having a roadmap to zero deforestation alongside the roadmap from transitioning away from fossil fuels, and to support the huge potential of carbon capture that we have with nature-based solutions. We have to win this divide. We have to sit down and dialogue about integrity. How do we make NBS, like, let's say, with the highest possible integrity? But if we don't use nature as a carbon capture technology, it's the only one today that is affordable, scalable, and at hand, working already. I'm in the board of Really Green, an ecological restoration company that just won the Earthshot Prize, so we're very proud. But it's happening. It's not in the paper. It's happening. Belterra, an agroforestry company, also very well, like, working here. So we need to, like, bridge these divides of trust to make this initiative to work. And I say the hardest part, if I think number 1 and 2 of your diagrams, we are already piloting this here as well with government and with companies. So you know, Naoko, the companies that are experimenting this. And the fourth and fifth here, I would say Brazilian government is launching the TFFF, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, which is already a step forward, going beyond carbon, valuing forests per hectare, and also sharing the benefits with the people that protect the forest on the ground. Brazil also has a working group on environmental accounting. We need to boost this group. It's not, let's say, we have all the possibility of being a country that goes through this fast because we have the knowledge, we have the tools, we understand, and we need it. To meet our NDCs, we need to get to zero deforestation by 2030 and restore 12 million hectares, right? And I finished saying, we just launched also an instrument that could be very interesting for this exercise. It's called the Quota for Environmental Reserve. In Portuguese, it's called CRA, C-R-A. And this is also a way to companies that need to compensate for their, say, their environmental impacts to support conserved and especially the private conservation lands that we have a land easement here that you can't undo. So you can put your private land into that, and we're starting to be able to trade these reserves. So it's a very interesting instrument to price, but also to, let's say, give incentives for those people that still own very rich biodiversity land to, let's say, to keep it forested. So a lot to be continued, but say we could really pilot this, not only at the company level here, but at the government level. So an invitation to continue this conversation beyond COP30.
Thank you, Ilona. Wow, a lot to be follow up, and it's going to be a big homework to Guido, who is supposed to talk about how we can mobilize those enablers under box 4 and 5, how that policy makers, regulators, and market participants can help us move forward. So that's one. Before I forget, I just want to recognize that one point you mentioned how to value the nature, but the standing forest, not the cutting forest. So that was so important. And I and Carlos, and very proudly, we are part of Planetary Guardians. One of the economic issues is how we can really value not the dead forest, but the standing forest. It's a huge, huge, huge challenge. So I just want to mention that. So Guido, now everything is on your plate.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you could say what the systemic is doing.
Oh, I'll come to that. What I find fascinating and very encouraging. I mean, what's not encouraging is the science, but what is encouraging is the consensus on the science. I'm also encouraged by the fact that whatever we call this, nature on the balance sheet is going mainstream. If you look at the risk survey of CEOs done by the World Economic Forum, nature and climate risks are among the top 3. This is really now becoming a boardroom issue. We're seeing policymakers underscore the importance of putting nature on the balance sheet, sometimes using different language. And let's also remember that this is fundamental economics. Every first year economics students gets taught that land is a productive asset, as is labor, as is capital. But then when the student goes on into the finer points of how economics is done today, it kind of completely falls off the agenda. We don't talk about nature, and that's not a fundamental question. It's not a conceptual question. It's just one of practice. So I think we've got the right concepts. We have the right science, and now we need to move to action. Let me focus on just briefly on just giving you a sense of trends and opportunities, both on the financial sector and on the policy side, that I find very encouraging, that give me hope that we can actually make a lot of progress. And what's in the back of my mind is I had the honor of being at on the Embrapa campus here in Belém. And if anyone has got an afternoon or a few hours to spare, I really urge you to go to the agricultural zone. The Embrapa team gives you guided tours of the innovation that has happened. And why is this so important and so important for our discussion? Is because 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, much of Brazil was deemed non-agricultural land, impossible for agriculture. The Northeast, the Cerrado, etc. And Brazilians didn't take this as they took this as a problem to solve, not as a problem to admire, and worked on it. And that's exactly what we need to now do with nature on the balance sheet, and the success of Brazilian agriculture speaks for itself. I think we can do the same. So just very specifically, 2 points on the financial sector. The financial sector obviously needs to price it. What does nature on the balance sheet mean concretely for companies? It means that either you get a lower cost of capital if you're integrating nature in your business decisions, or you get a higher enterprise value. So your equity value goes up. Often, ideally, you want to do both. In the financial sector, we're seeing a lot of banks in particular now say, well, we lend to the agriculture sector, we lend to infrastructure. And today, we don't really take natural capital, nature risks into consideration when we make credit decisions. But we actually have the data to do so. This is no longer a data challenge. We also have a lot of the standards that, in particular, the Capitals Coalition has developed. And remember the decision that's very consequential from last week, that the ISSB, the International Sustainable Standards Board, which sets accounting standards, decided to include nature into their forward-looking work. So we've got the standards, we've got the data, but we need to put the pieces together. And I'm 100% convinced, and I know from discussions with several banks, that there are opportunities where you can put nature risks into credit products today and improve their performance. In the end, the nature positive stewards get a lower cost of capital, lower interest rates, and longer tenor. The banks get lower risk, everyone makes more money, and I think that's a solution that we're very excited to build. Second innovation that I'm very excited about is there are many variants of investing in nature as an intrinsic asset for its intrinsic value. I, for one, am very excited by the work that Doug Eager is doing, and many others around natural asset companies. The first few real transactions are happening, and we're beginning to see very advanced discussions on how these assets can become tradable in stock markets. Why is that important? Because liquidity is everything after return. And so I think I'm seeing a path forward. So those are 2 things I wanted to tease out. There's more to say about the financial sector, but those are 2 of the ideas I'm most excited about. Coming to the policy side. If you're finance minister today, natural capital and investing in resilience is not part of your calculus. And that is just bad economics, or bad economic practice, I should say, because economic fundamentally teaches us that investing in resilience generates better economic outcomes, in technical terms, lower GDP volatility and higher GDP growth relative to baseline. But that's not how economics is practiced today, simply because the models we use are 40, 50 years old. They haven't really changed. And when they were developed, we didn't have the data, again, the data point, and we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the science, Carlos, and we didn't really focus on resilience. Now, those are problems that we can solve, just like Embrapa drove the green revolution here. And I'm very encouraged by the leadership of a few countries. Uganda currently is designing a resilience agriculture program and estimating the resilience benefits of that. And they're looking at 1% of additional GDP growth per year. These are numbers that have to be validated by the IMF, etc. But we're beginning to see a path forward. And there are a lot of countries that want to do this. And what this will do, it'll make nature, natural capital, an investment for governments, for finance ministers. And that's a critical point. The environment ministers they are convinced, but we need to convince the finance ministers. If and when that happens, and not just if, when that happens, and as this happens, the finance ministers will then also work to resolve some of the policy challenges that are holding things back. Lend tenure, and many others, which are important, tricky issues, but again, they all have solutions. Remember the enterprising and the not taking no for an answer spirit that Embrapa and Brazilian agriculture have displayed. Final point is governments can and need to make it easier for companies to put nature on the balance sheet. I applaud the International Sustainable Forestry Council for the leadership. But what it also shows is that it shows some of its members in Australia can put, not all, but quite a bit of nature easily on their balance sheet because there's legislation in place to value carbon. And this is domestic legislation. This is not international carbon credits. Others, and I believe that's the situation in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, can't do so. Now, might it be good policy for a country to apply a carbon price? I'm not talking about credits here necessarily, just a carbon price domestically. Well, we ran some headline numbers, and let me just share them with you because I think they're really encouraging. If we apply $100 per ton carbon price on land-based carbon emissions, that will pull in every year about $700 billion in financing, private financing into better land management, including forestry. That's a much bigger number than some of the financing gap numbers that are out there. Now you would say, okay, that's very nice, but it's going to make everything much more expensive. And that's true. But if we're looking at food prices on average would rise 3 to 8%. That's a one-off rise. Now you put $100 per ton carbon pricing in, food prices rise by 3 to 8%, which is much, much less than we've seen under COVID and in recent years. Actually, much less than the volatility of many food prices year on year. And that's a one-off change. Now, that's a policy that governments might want to consider and not necessarily wait for international carbon markets to come to the rescue, which we need to advance. But many countries, Brazil being one of them, have the means to do this domestically. So those are some of the points I want to share. But just to really reiterate the point, I think we've won the argument on principle. We now need to become super, super practical. I'm encouraged by some of the problem solving. That's something that we at Systemic are very pleased and honored to help drive. I think there's a huge amount to learn from lessons. Brazil is also putting in place EcoInvest, many other really fascinating, very smart subsidy schemes for pulling money in that return great value for the government. I'm not saying all solutions come from Brazil, but we're here, so let's study them, let's understand them, and let's take these to scale. And do go to the Embrapa campus. Thanks.
Wow, very comprehensive way forward. So I think we have time for one more round. But before I have you, Guido, and you talk about how important to get the ears of finance ministers, you can actually mention about our report that to make the natural capital account, right? Why don't you refer to, because it was a trial for our effort to get their eyes or ears.
Yeah, thank you. So, Naoko, we worked with the International High-Level Experts Group on Climate Finance, which is releasing its report on Friday, which basically sets it is the gold standard. It's the global consensus on international climate finance. What are the needs? What are the opportunities? And what are the actions that need to happen? And obviously it works closely with the Circle of Finance Ministers and other efforts. And there is there is a full agreement that natural capital is one of the best investment opportunities for countries. Take the example of restoring degraded lands. The returns are very, very high, but there is a small problem. And the problem is that we have a lot of micro data, we have a lot of project evidence, but we haven't translated that into language, into tools that speak to finance ministers. How far is it going to increase growth? What are some of the other macro fiscal multipliers? How might it reduce my costs of debt and my debt sustainability? These are all technical issues. They sound more complicated than they are because a lot of it is common sense. But we just haven't done that technical work yet. And I think that's and there is a not just a realization, but there is a strong commitment from the financing community, from the financial community to take these issues on. And it's just one illustration. The Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, which brings together well over 100 finance ministers, held one event at the annual meeting in Washington, D.C. in October. And that event was essentially on putting nature on the balance sheet. That's not the language they use, but it's exactly the spirit through the macro fiscal work. And so that's something that we are very pleased to. Allow me to say one more thing is let's also make sure that this is not seen as the silver bullet that solves all problems. Ilona, you've spoken about illegality. 90% of deforestation is illegal in the Amazon. So the economics is really, really important. If we don't get it right, we won't be able to tackle the issue, but it's also about enforcing existing laws and all the other things that you've spoken about.
No, thank you so much. We just published this on the nature, how do you call it? Make nature account for.
Make natural capital
Make
count.
natural capital count. So that was a kind of companion paper to this independent high expert because they usually focus on climate finance. And this year, we made a heroic effort to really focus on the finance for natural capital because that kind of push is absolutely needed. And our hope is that in coming years, we can get the interest of finance ministers much more significantly. Then we can shift this number 4 and 5, this staircase. But because let's move on to that another second round. A lot 20 minutes. So that I will come with you first if you have a time constraint. But the Carlos, you hear a lot about the call for standardized methodology to really capture the full value of natural capital, which is very important. But from your point of view, you have seen that how the community trying to capture that nature, natural, the value of natural capital, carbon credit, and a lot happening. Do you have any warning that for us to move forward to staircase, and what are the important things we shouldn't miss, and what are the important things we should really focus on based on your the viewpoint, and anything else that you learn from?
Yeah,
Aslan.
then let me tell you about the Amazon. Studies show that the efficient of water recycling in the Amazon maintains the rainfall south of the Amazon, Atlantic forest, etc. Brazil is the 4th largest producer of food, 2nd largest exporter of food. A study showed that if we cross the tipping point of the Amazon, currently this ecosystem service is worth $200 billion a year in the agricultural sector, just to show you the importance of maintaining these ecosystem services, even for the current agriculture in Brazil. The second point is that agriculture here, livestock, soy crop farms, etc., it's very low productivity, very low productivity. And the economy, we call social economy of healthy standing forests and flowing rivers, still a very small scale. We made a study that showed all products of the biodiversity, has 13% of the world's biodiversity. Ilona mentioned Brazil has 20%. And this is only 1.5% of Amazon GDP. One product, meat from cattle, 17% of GDP. So it does not make any sense because this social bioeconomy, these cooperatives using more than 50 products of the biodiversity, they are much more profitable, 3 to 5, 7 times more profitable than livestock and soy crops. And also they give up to 20% more employment. They maintain the forest. They are based on the knowledge of indigenous people, local communities. So the big question now is culturally, we have to start giving scale. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, all Europeans here, but the Europeans came to the Americas 500 years ago. North America, Central America, South America. They kill most of the indigenous people. They completely ignored the knowledge of indigenous people. They brought to their products, cattle, other products, and that's the driver. Ilona mentioned 90% of deforestation is illegal, mostly for livestock. So I'm just saying we have to change culturally, globally. We would like globally, I'm talking about the Amazon, but it's global biodiversity, really to bring the global biodiversity financially, but also a recent study, and I finish with that. A recent study, the indigenous people in the Amazon use more than 2,300 products, 1,500 medicinal plants, 250 fruits, 250 vegetable oils. And the study showed 15 fruits, not only as food, tremendously good for health. So this is another benefit for us globally, creating the social bioeconomy of standing force globally, but certainly to save the Amazon.
Thank you, Carlos. So really a good entry point and leave it to maybe to Isono-san, because you also mentioned that your forest has so many valuable, diverse value, not only to your company, but to the society or to as a global common goods, but they are not really economically or financially appreciated. What kind of steps you think that we need to take? That Guido made an example of Polycom recognized an array here. And in case of Forico, that because of this through a kind of not only good natural capital accounting, but also through the market economy, market transaction, is to be able to realize some of those social or the global the value to the society. What kind of things you think that your value be realized that on your book? Do you have any request to the policymakers or that another outside people?
Well, first, I think I anyway have to measure what's happening in the forest is inside there. So the forest is having a not only the trees itself, and as I said before, that the fresh water is coming through the forest, and other things like recreation or the carbon capturing or the soil itself is how important this is. So those are the things that we are starting to measure in one of the plantation areas that we have in northern part of Hokkaido, which is called Sarufutsu. And the Sarufutsu project is right now measuring using the cameras or some kind of a using the instruments and others, so that the how many birds are there, or what's the water itself, what kind of ingredients of the water itself is. And quite an interesting thing is that that Sarufutsu area is facing the ocean, and the ocean is the Okhotsuku Ocean, and it is quite famous for the scallops, which means that the forest has a lot of iron minerals, and that is flowing into the ocean, so that the seafood is growing much bigger than the other place of the ocean. So that relation between the forests and oceans are the other important aspects that the value of the forest could be valued. So that those are the things that we are right now doing. And it may be, this is Brazil, so it may be a little bit a local issue, but right now a lot of bears in Japan are coming down to the city, and why those bears are coming down to the city is one of the things it is said is that the weather is getting hot, warmer, so that there aren't enough food in the forest. So it comes to the human people's life and getting the food from there. But the other things that I do think, I'm feeling to think right now is that the forest itself is now, if it is not well maintained, or if it's not managed, there will be not enough crops growing inside the forest. So that the issue is the forest, even though you have the forest, it makes this kind of value. The issue is how it is well maintained or well managed. And that makes a big difference between the not managed forest and the well managed forest. And the value should be different from the not well managed forest and the well managed forest. And I think that's one of the things that I think we OG should be trying to find out, maybe with working with the ISFC's group. And so that that's one of the things that we are trying to do.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and like in Brazil also, we have a 250,000 hectare of land, and between those forest lands, there is a degraded land, and our Brazilian team is regenerating the forest again between the plantation forest. So those are the things that I think we do have to do as the forest owner in the future and make more value and more value to the
to
forest.
be
more than
recognized
forest.
by financial market.
Thank
I never thought about this another bear issue because it's a real serious issue to us Japanese. It's at the first of the topic of the if you turn on the TV, where bear pop up and how many are kind of injured. But the solution would be not to kill them, but to really to maintain the forest. It's a wonderful the solution to that. Nakamura-san, you mentioned a lot of, the great solution to which will increase the value of the natural capital. What kind of things you think we need to do together through this initiative that, to strengthen that value?
Oh, thanks for the questions. At first, Brazil is a big agriculture country, so we must think that high agriculture must be part of the national investment priority because agriculture generates around 22% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but it receives only 4% of climate finance. So I mentioned that we have an actual solution to generate both economic values and climate benefits to scale more. So that you mentioned the government should set clear rules and reduce the risks for the agriculture projects. And the investors should give more investment to agriculture sectors. And companies, solution providers like us bring the more proven technologies, science-based, innovation-driven technologies. That is very important point. So the Ajinomoto, we think ourselves solution provider. We can help the government, public institutions, companies, individuals to enhance the value of their nature asset. So if the framework envisioned by the nature on the balance sheet is put in the place, for example, the restored farmland, restored forest land that generates a tradable carbon credit may be recorded as an asset, while degraded land may be treated as a future liabilities. If it will become the society where both solution providers and asset owners are rewarded for making the nature asset better, it will encourage the company to deliver and develop the more powerful innovations and drive more investment and create a positive cycle to this field, even more growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I just want to also let you know that as an mountain group, the group supporting this, working for this nature on the balance sheet initiative, the next step our doing is this catalog. I mean, that what kind of policy measures are needed to move up from box 1 to 3 to 4, 5, and we are trying to collect a lot of good example. What kind of policy measures or regulations are needed to realize that the value of the natural capital? So your proposal will be very, very useful if we can go together, that the OG, the Ajinomoto, and the others, that the concrete the mechanism to reveal and realize those the investment you have been already starting to do, including innovation. So that's going to be our next step. So we come back to you on that one. So the time is almost now 5 minutes left. So I just want to ask also Ilona for your final takeaway, and also Guido.
Sure, just 3 quick messages, but very important one. I really think that there's, the nature and the balance sheet initiative is very important to rescue Mission 1.5,
Right.
Goal that we all should work here towards this week, because as I said before, but I just want to make sure we all get out of here thinking this is a whole of society exercise. Of course, we have to go to the roadmap of transitioning away from fossil fuels, but if we don't have a roadmap to zero deforestation, will not make it. And this is a very important part of this. And I can tell you, and linking to a point that Guido said, we not only need to incentivize financial ministries to understand, like they say, the positive sides, but the tax that they lose from the illicit economies, we have to quantify that. That would be a nice exercise for us here in Brazil. We want to do that. We can do it systemic. To say we are in a region with very informal and mostly led by either informal or illicit economic activity. We have to be able to shift that if we want the planet to survive. So add nature to the climate conversation and invest, really help us to build trust in credible, high integrity, nature-based solutions to carbon capture, because that's what we have today. I think I just wanted to reinforce these points. More than welcome to continue this conversation, this endeavor here with you, Naoko. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Guido?
Yeah, just picking
Yeah,
up
right.
directly on this is the urgency is clear, we need to act, but it's also clear that these are good investments. And that is the really good news. These are good investments for companies, and these are very, very good investments for countries. We're not making them right now because we haven't thought about it. That's an easy problem to solve. We need to figure out some of the macroeconomic programming tools. That's also relatively straightforward piece to work out. We need to improve policies. That's also, I think, very, very doable, particularly if companies and governments work together. There are clear opportunities to increase massively investments in sustainable forestry. That's what the ISFC shows us. And the policies are in the hard self-interest of countries. It is in Brazil's interest to tackle Amazon deforestation. It is in every other interest. So that makes me very hopeful. We've got a lot of work to do, but this is a fantastic group. Ilona, thank you for just also undermining, and I'll close with that, the importance of the roadmap. This is so critical. We need to have a shared direction of travel. I think we also have that. And we're beginning to see a lot of innovations here. We now have also the land banking group in the room. Jamie has just joined us, and it's just one of the many companies, technology-based companies that are emerging, that are trying to solve some of these coordination data issues. And so, and they will succeed. The land banking group will succeed. Many others will succeed, and that's going to give us the tools. So let's come back together at the next COP and really review the scaling up examples and see what, and nothing inspires, motivates action more than success in some of the countries. So let's create those successes. There's a lot happening here in Brazil. We'll work together on tackling the point that you've just mentioned. And thank you, Naoko, for getting us all together.
So Professor Carlo leads the science panel for the Amazon, and we're launching the report at 4:30 p.m. at the Science Pavilion.
Today?
And one of the chapters I contributed to is about this disruptive connectivity of the Amazon through the illicit economy. So conversation will continue at the Science Pavilion at 4:30. Join us.
Very well done. So let's go to 4:30 Planetary Science Pavilion to really understand what's going on there. But I just want to thank you, everybody, patiently listening to us. And I hope that this group together, inspire you and maybe strengthen your commitment going forward. When we initiate this, it was such a daunting agenda. I really don't know that if we can really make it, but the session like today really energized me and also convinced me this is the right thing to do. But this conversation also give me sense of urgency. So we can't have 20 years of roadmap. We really have to have 5 years or 3 years, and we need to move together. But by working together with a lot of issues that standardizes the method and capturing natural capital, the integrity, but also working with policymakers and the business and the catalog what's working and what's not working. I think we have a very clear way to go forward, so that I really want to thank everybody here in this room. Let's move together. Thank you so much.